Hey everyone, Josh here. So today on the Touareg, we are doing a shift kit, the Transgo shift kit. So it should correct rough shifts, flares during upshifts and down, rough coast downshifts, and torque converter slip and shudder, which I think I've got the last one, slip and shudder. So we're gonna give this a try. So I have a video on basically draining and refilling the transmission, so I'm going to skip over that part. We're just going to go straight to removing the valve body itself. So as far as parts, you just need the Transgo shift kit, some oil in case you spill some, which of course you're going to spill some. I'm using a turkey pan to try and catch as much oil as I can because it's just a messy mess in there. You need your filling tool of some sort. And then we're just going to use some paper towel, or not paper towel, but some newspaper so we don't get any lint and stuff inside. And then I think the Transgo kit comes with everything else. You're going to need a bench grinder or a normal grinder to get the solenoids apart. So, oh, and something to precisely measure the stems, which I just have a vernier caliper, so it's not real precise, but it should get us where we need to go. And then the last thing would be red Loctite. I don't think I've got any red Loctite, but I've got sleeve retaining compound, so I think that'll be just as good. So we're gonna skip to underneath here now and get the valve body out. Okay, so I got the filter out of here. I've been letting it drip dry for a bit. The front is this way from how I'm filming here. So there's a bunch of different connector styles here. You want to be careful because it's almost 20 years old and probably been hot and everything's been brittle, I'm going to assume. So this here will be your shift lever, so you got to make sure that gets put back in going up. This would be a temperature sensor, so I'm just going to bolt this here. These connectors, you have the easy way of doing it. It's really sketchy getting your first one to get unplugged without breaking the connector. Okay, so you're just going to push in on the connector itself, just so there's no pressure on that lock pin, and slide a screwdriver in the back side, and then just kind of pry / pull it out, and away it goes. There's a couple back here where the window's on the side, you push in to be able to get the plug out. This connector here doesn't have to get unplugged, it doesn't come with the valve body, but it needs to get off of here. You don't want to take these two bolts out because they hold the pins in that hold the solenoids in, so everything's going to fall in your face. So quick and easy way, just got a little detent lock there, so if you push down on that, if I've had a second hand, you just slide that backwards. As far as getting this apart, there's a bunch of these 10mm bolts around the outside. I believe are the ones we want. These smaller ones are going to separate the top and the bottom of the valve bodies apart, so don't touch those yet, just these big ones around the outside edge. I'm not going to touch this if I don't have to, so just make sure you know where each connector goes so everything gets put back together correctly. And then just make sure that pin gets put in there into that shift rod here. Okay, so everything's unplugged. These back two, they had that plug on, or the connector on the side for the unlocking tab. This temperature sensor went in there, unbolted it, it's out of the way. I can just kind of tuck stuff up out of the way, and then we're gonna undo all these bolts and then get this valve body out and on the bench so we can start working on it right side up. Okay, so here's the valve body out. I'm gonna put it on my drain pan and put a can of brake cleaner to it and get it all less oily. So doing this on jack stands is not ideal, and I don't think there's a way of getting this out without getting just covered in oil. I had missed a bolt cross pan, so I was underneath holding it up while trying to get that undone. I've got transmission oil up my nose and up to my shoulders, and my phone took a good bath in it too, so it's just a terrible time getting that out. But anyways, I can get that all cleaned up. And then it gives you a nice view up into your transmission here now, so you can just take a look and make sure there's nothing funky. None of these are all hanging out or anything like that, which everything looks fine up here. So I'm gonna get that valve body cleaned up and get it on the bench. Okay, so it's on the bench. I've kind of given up on keeping it less oily. It's just oil comes from everywhere. But we gotta take all these little bolts off all the way around. And then as you can see, there's different heights. So we've got this one here will probably be a longer one. That one there will be a longer one. So I think there's probably be 3 different lengths. So whether you want to mark them or just kind of make a mental note of longer ones versus short ones, I'll probably start from the outside, work my way in, and then I can kind of figure out which ones are short and which ones are long, and then I'll mark them with a paint marker. But anyways, once all those are out, there's a couple check balls and stuff inside. So the plan is get those out, hold the body together, flip it over, and then take this bottom off the top. So yeah, we're gonna get this unbolted and then carry on. So yeah, just the 3 sizes. So we've got the really long ones that went in all these raised spots, like really raised spots, and the majority of them were just in the rest. And then yeah, the 4 small ones just where I said at the bottom here. But anyway, so you can see it's popped up off of the separator plate and the bottom part of the housing. So I'm gonna clamp them together with my vice grip hands, and then we'll flip it over. I guess the other option was if you got those jaw type clamps, you could clamp it together. I don't have anything strong enough to hold it, so I'm just gonna hope that none of the check balls fall out. Okay, so we've got it apart here. So this is the reason you want the top side on the bottom, is you've got a check ball there, a check ball there, and a check ball there, along with all these other miscellaneous check valves. So with that on the bottom side, those balls aren't going to fall out, because according to instructions, some have different amounts, so you don't know necessarily where they live technically. Then we got some filters here. So then the separator plate got a little bit of filings and stuff on it, which doesn't look the greatest, but is what it is. We're gonna make sure we clean everything up real nice. And then this would have been the top side, so we've only got that check valve there, and then a big filter down here. So it's a lot nicer having this coming up, so if you only lose those 2 check valves, it's pretty obvious where they go, whereas this one's got just a pile more. So we're going to clean this up. This one is the part that gets all the modifications done along with the drilling of the separator plate. So we're going to get this cleaned up and actually start on installing this kit. Okay, so we're going to do the repairs on the solenoids first. So we've got 6 of these new end caps. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So your instructions that you obviously got with the kit shows you where they all go. So when you remove them, you're going to want to mark them and make sure they get put back in their original homes. It's just normal standard. So if you obviously have the kit, but basically we're going to grind the end cap off, get the armature out, measure what size stem it is, and then use the drill bit according to what this says. Basically put it in there, spin it around, so that way when you put the armature in, it should just fall right back out. So we're going to see what these ones are kind of like from, or how they are before we drill them out. So yeah, I'm just going to leave that there. To get these out, we're going to take this plate off for these 5. There'll be a pin in here that holds them in, and then this one here is just a single plate right here to hold that solenoid in. So we're going to take that apart and then start grinding these apart. Okay, so I've got the solenoid out. So the next step, so we're going to have to check for resistance between the 2 pins in there. It says should be about 5 to 7 ohms. I would imagine you'd be missing gears altogether if you had a fault here, or there'd be a code in the TCU. But anyways, so now we're going to grind this end cap off and get this apart. So this is a good point to say, if you are sending your valve body in for a core just to get a reman or a new valve body, they're going to say that this is a damaged core once you take these solenoids apart. So just keep that in mind before you do that if you do want to get core money out of this and you don't think this is going to solve your issue, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So here on my precision bench vise, I just have this clamped gently, strap paper towel to keep the stem clean. Just kind of went around the outside edge until this kind of pops off. And then this will be your armature inside, so we're going to take that over to the bench. The next thing you also have to do is grind the lip off of here yet as well. Okay, so doing the grinding part, or the drilling part, whatever you want to call it here. So you just basically measure that stem, which I'm using a fairly not precise instrument, but I ended up at 0.1565, so I'm going to use the long drill bit. So you just basically, so this one's just ever so slightly longer. It's also bigger, so that kind of makes sense. So just going to get the valve stem and then just do as it says in there, put it all the way in, turn it both directions for 15 seconds, and then take the drill bit out counterclockwise. So we're just doing this by hand too, by the way. Okay, so the bottom half is done. All the solenoids are done. Torque converter one, it was a little sticky. I had to do the drill bit trick a few times before it would fall in and out nicely, so hopefully that was my issue. But up next, you got to change all of these with the corresponding parts. So you just can kind of look at the picture. It kind of shows you which ones you're taking out. So for an example, this very first one here, you have this retainer. So if you just push in a little bit with your thumb, that retainer comes loose, and then with a little magnet, you can pop that off and get it. Everything should come out this side here. So nothing's really labeled on which ones are which. This one looks very similar, but this is the one you need. So you just kind of use, so this is a step one. It's got that little tang on the top side there, whereas this one doesn't. So this and this gets thrown out, as you can read here, and the new updated one goes in. Okay, so I've got this one here done. This one here, there wasn't really anything too special, but this one here is different. So I've taken out this L retainer, the spring, and that plunger. And the new one has a sleeve where that plunger goes inside, and then spring, retainer, and a small retainer. So there's two that look pretty close to the same in the packages, but the way you can tell the difference is we're on this step here. The new one's got a little tiny retainer, whereas this bottom one here has got a nice big long retainer, which that's in that bag still. So we're just going to assemble this in here and then carry on. Okay, so in this fourth step is much the same. You're taking this assembly out and you're installing the sleeved version in. And that is, if you're looking here, not this retainer, but there is one in here. That's the one I've got out. Okay, so that top half the valve body is done now. Got all the updated spools and stuff in there. So up next, we're going to do the separator plate update, which is drilling holes. So look twice, drill once. Make sure you're drilling. They supply two small drill bits. That's the bigger one. You'll be able to see when you get your own. Yeah, so all of the A ones, you use the bigger drill bit, and the B ones are the smaller. You just kind of go along. So my plan is I'm going to get a paint marker and just go across and mark all the A's, drill all the A's, and then wipe it clean, and then do all the B's, so that way you're not getting the wrong holes drilled. So yeah, it's not too bad, just don't break the drill bit. So I got all these smaller holes drilled out now too. The drill bit seemed to break on every single hole, so it surprisingly drills pretty good even with it broken. So I just punched the broken tip of the drill bit out with the punch or with a pick, and then just keep drilling. So I don't know, it all worked. So just check and make sure you get rid of all the filings and stuff off the back side, and give it a good wash, and then we should be good for reassembly. Okay, so I got the filter and the check valves and everything back into the bottom here. Got the separator plate sitting on where it needs to be. So the little those little white check balls, they seem to like to fall out. So I want to make sure you're holding this tight to that plate. Basically, I'm going to flip it over and set it down on here. Okay, so I've got that sitting on there. Got that little gap, so I kind of gently twisted it just a little bit, and I heard a couple clicks, so I think everything's sitting in where it needs to be. The other way you can figure it out is if you push down by hand, it should come down all the way. If something's not sitting where it should be, you shouldn't be able to close it like that. So now that that's sitting where I think it needs to be, I'm gonna squish both halves now, and that'll flip it over so I can get all these bolts in. Okay, so I got it flipped over, and once I flipped it over, I kind of held it down, and I just tightened down the center bolt here, just to kind of keep everything squished. That way nothing would fall out. So I'm gonna put everything together, put all these millions of bolts in. From online, from what I saw, I believe this was 89 inch-pounds, which when I was using the torque wrench taking it off, I was around that 80 to 90 inch-pound area, so I think that would be pretty safe for reassembly. And as far as installing it back into the transmission, I didn't really see 100% on a good torque spec or a reputable torque spec. So I'm just gonna kind of do it by feel. If I find the actual torque spec, I'll include it in the description in case you don't feel comfortable doing it by feel. But then yeah, you can just kind of reassemble fresh fluid if you want, filter, all that good stuff. You can watch my other video as far as filling it, and then yeah, once this is in, we're gonna do a recal or like reset the TCU and then see how it drives. All right, so we checked the oil, or I checked the oil after I warmed it up. Went through all the gears and everything's good. So now we're going to do the transmission reset. So basically it tells you what to do there: ignition on, engine off, transmission in park. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Then I guess wait 30 seconds and then I'll key off. And then we'll start it up and go for another drive. I had a couple of harsh shifts, so we're gonna see if that fixes it. Okay, so I got about 400 kilometers on it yesterday, and we're starting on to day 2 here now. It was doing some pretty funky things. Like I had a few times like going downhill, coasting, where it didn't seem to want to know what gear it wanted to go in. But it seems to be acting up, or acting good now. Yeah, so my main reason for doing this was take off. It didn't seem to want to engage until you'd rev it up, and then you have a harsh engagement, and also a torque converter shudder, what I believe was a torque converter shudder. So the takeoff is going to work nice. I'll just show that here now. Nice and smooth. The torque converter shudder is still there, and I'm starting to think it's engine related, not transmission related. It's just high load, high RPM, it has a miss, or a shudder basically. So I think I'll stop looking at the transmission, and I think it's time to start looking at possibly injectors or the ECU file. So the kit seemed to do what it was said it would do, so I'm happy with it so far. So if you got some bad engagement or rough shifts or anything like that, then I would definitely consider putting this kit in. So thanks for watching, and hopefully it helped.